discover raw, inspiring stories from runners who've been right where you are. Get the tips, tricks, and gear that only runners who've been out there the longest would be able to share. From laughter to tears, heartbreak to triumph. Join us as we celebrate every step taken in the ultra world. This is the Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast. With your host, he's English, not Australian, Richard Gleave.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 1 of the all-new Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast with me, your host, Richard Gleave. It's taken a short while, mostly because I'm pretty technically challenged, but I'm super excited to be kicking this thing off with you today. I thought I would start with a little bit about me, and this first episode will be mostly about me, just to give you context. And then moving on, we'll have a bunch of guests, and it'll be way more entertaining and exciting to listen to than just me droning on. So a little bit about me first. I reside in the livable forest, also known as Kingwood, Texas. That's on the northeast outskirts of Houston. Quick shout out to the local trail group, the Kingwood Trail Runners. But I'm originally from a town called Macclesfield over in England, and I do go back, fortunately, to visit my mum, a few times every year. I've been running slow marathons and subsequently ultra marathons since about 2015. At this point, I've done everything from 50Ks all the way up through 200 plus miles. And I do run both here in the US and over in the UK, which is kind of fun and different. Still so much to learn from all those people out there. And there are so many incredible folks out there who've been involved in and around this uplifting sport for so long. I just can't wait to get out there and get talking to them. So what's this podcast about? Ultra running. Well, very slow ultra running, to be specific. It's about finding commonality and reveling in the shared hardships of competing in this sport. It's about finding ways to celebrate the wins and the losses when you're out there for so long. It's about growth, really, and challenging yourself. It's about learning how to push beyond what you think you can do and creating opportunities to harness the collective power and knowledge and experience that the slower end of the competition bring to the table, and passing all that on to others in the hope that somebody else might benefit, which I'm a huge fan of, and I definitely think is representative of the wider ultra community. Is certainly what makes it different, I think, from regular road running. So why did we set up to make this podcast? Well, as with all the best ideas, this one started with a conversation over beers in the pub. And anyone that knows me, I'm a sucker for a beer, particularly craft beer. I stay away from the Coors Light, Bud Light kind of thing. But yeah, I really enjoy a craft beer, and I get sidetracked very easily, as you can tell. For the podcast, yeah, there's a lot of focus on the front of the pack, and rightly so. I mean, these folks are phenomenal, and they deserve all the kudos they get. But I just feel like there are so many uplifting everyday runners out there that make a conscious decision to sort of try some ridiculously long and difficult races for a variety of reasons. And they're out there getting it done, or not getting it done in some cases. And I think that when you get into that, it makes for some really interesting stories and compelling content. And ultimately, from a selfish perspective, I want to learn whatever it is all those people know. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm out here running with everybody else. How's everybody doing all this stuff? A great example, I ran a race called the Cowboy 200 last November, one of the coldest races I've ever run. And I've done some cold ones. Sidebar, it's cold in Nebraska in November, and it's really windy. Anyway, running this race, bumped into a lady who had run her first ultra, a 50K, the week before. In fact, it was the ultra distance at the Marine Corps Marathon. She then shows up at the start line of a 200-mile race the next weekend with no real GPS route on her watch, a little idea of what that distance entailed. But there she was. And she crossed the starting line with everybody else. How she wasn't absolutely cacking it right before that gun went off on that dark November morning, I don't know. Maybe she was. Maybe she needs to come on the show and tell us, But that's the kind of reasoning. That's the kind of story that I want to know about. That's why, we decided to start this podcast, for amazing insights and moments like that, to really understand what drives that. And I think she was brilliant. She has one of the most gutsiest things I've heard of doing for a long time, to run your first 50K and the following weekend jump into start and make a good attempt at a 200-mile race. I think ultimately she tapped out around 50, 55 miles, and that wasn't due to her wanting to stop. She had some injury thing, I think, going on. Again, would be great to have her on to clarify, but that's the kind of mindset I want to know. Like, she showed up, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And like I said, one of the gutsiest moves I've heard of in a long time from an ultra perspective. So yeah, that's really what we're trying to get to here. What are those stories? So who would it be for, this podcast? Well, certainly I would imagine you might be interested if you are sort of middle to the back of the pack runner or walker in some cases, who are non-elite like me. People with regular lives, families, work commitments, but who are navigating their way through all of that and come out the other side with epic tales of success and failure at some really huge events. Also, people perhaps looking for a bit of inspiration or motivation. People that want to find a community to relate to if they don't have the opportunity to connect with others directly wherever they happen to live, like with a group or a running group or something like that. Not everyone has access to one of those, but still we want to feel like we're a part of something bigger, and that there are relatable folks out there sharing their experiences, going through the same struggles as you are, and availability to connect and share experience through a Facebook group. Side note, coming soon for the Choose to Endure podcast. That might be really useful. So topics that we might choose to get into, well, as with anything, this might change, and who knows where it could end up down the line. But I suppose out of the gate, I would definitely envision sharing those stories, inspirations, motivations, maybe. Certainly having some interviews with kick-ass, badass people out there. Want to get into some race reviews too, gear reviews. Like, is gear choice different based on how long you're out there from front to the back, or does it not change? Same goes for training, really. Is there a difference in training when you're super slow like myself versus others? I want to hear from coaches, along with other folks, other kind of what I would call supporting cast folks, people in the sports therapy field or maybe nutrition field, who are definitely going to tell me that the beers I have along the way, and I like a 50-mile beer every 50 miles, obviously, those nutrition people are probably going to tell me that's a really dumb idea, and I get it, but I have fun with it, and I like to do it. So I want to hear from the nutrition folks and see what they have to say, and especially I want to hear from race directors to see how, with the UTMB Whistler big debacle going on, how they're prepping, or if they're even bothered about UTMB coming down, in their neck of the woods. But more so, I want to understand what makes them and their races unique. And from our perspective, if or how they're tailored to or accessible by slower runners like ourselves. Are the cutoffs very tailored to allow it to be more of a journey event and not so much an actual race where you're constantly chasing the next aid station cutoff? Having recently had the opportunity to be a part of a crew and pace some miles out at Moab, I would also love to get more understanding of that from those guys and girls that spend many hours doing it, along with volunteering viewpoints. I know there are a ton of people out there that do a whole bunch of volunteering, and I really want to hear from them about why they choose to do it, and tips and tricks on the volunteering side. Really, as far as topics, really just anything along the lines of generally delving into the feeling of what it's like to be at the tail end of the ultra running universe. What does it look like in our space? So I hope that gives you a bit of a flavor of what I anticipate this podcast could ultimately become, and the sorts of information that I would love to put out there and share with people. This one, admittedly, will be a little shorter than I hope most will be. I want to shoot for a sweet spot of probably 45 minutes or so, or about 4.5 to 5 miles in my terminology. And I think once I get the recording and editing down, hopefully we'll be able to get on a weekly cadence for releasing new episodes. And just so we're clear, no, I haven't done this before. And yes, I do hope to get better at it as we go. But if anyone out there wants to, wants to lend a hand, let me know. So as we crest the proverbial hill of this introductory chapter, just remember that everyone's ultra journey is marked by sort of a swath of personal peaks, followed by the lows of challenging valleys. We've set our course here today, mapping out the terrain and what lies ahead in episodes in this series. We're really after the sweat, the strategy, and the soul of ultra running as it relates to us, the non-elites. I hope you choose to join me for the miles ahead as we get deeper into the trails less traveled. By us, the slower majority, and you might argue the real endurance athletes out there. Thank you for towing this starting line, and I hope we can share and run some extra miles and moments together as we go. So make sure to hit subscribe and tune in next time as we approach the next aid station.
Thanks for running with us at the Choose to Endure podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. We had a blast. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up our Facebook page at Choose to Endure. Keep racking up the miles and the stories, and we'll catch you at the next trailhead. Until then, remember to run long, run strong.